Less than 24 hours before Diane Mercer was supposed to watch her only son get married, Ryan looked at the woman who had raised him and asked her not to come. He did not say there was no seat for her. He did not blame the guest list. He told her the truth. She embarrassed him. Diane stood there holding a worn leather jewelry box that had belonged to Ryan's late father, Tom, and for a moment she said nothing. Then she asked one quiet question. Was he ashamed that she was his mother? Ryan could not bring himself to answer. What he did not know was that Diane had come to the rehearsal dinner carrying something far more important than an old family keepsake. Hidden beneath Tom's watch was a sealed hospital envelope. She had planned to tell Ryan what was inside that night. Instead, she slipped it back into her purse and made a decision Ryan would spend months wishing he could undo. Only minutes earlier, the country club had looked like the beginning of a perfect American wedding weekend. Crystal glasses caught the light above white tablecloths. Men in tailored jackets spoke casually about golf memberships, property investments, vacation homes, and people Ryan hoped would one day become clients. Lauren Whitfield's relatives seemed to belong to a world Ryan had spent years trying to enter. He had built a successful career in commercial real estate, changed the way he dressed, changed the places he went, and learned how to move through rooms where nobody knew the neighborhood that had raised him. Then Diane arrived in a simple blue dress she had chosen carefully for the occasion. She drove an aging Buick past a row of polished luxury cars and walked inside carrying the leather box in both hands. Lauren greeted her warmly. Several guests did too. But Ryan's attention had already fixed on every detail he feared other people might notice, and the more comfortable Diane became, the more uncomfortable her son seemed to grow. At dinner, someone asked Diane what Ryan had been like as a boy. She smiled and told a harmless story about the summers Ryan spent helping his father repair lawnmowers for neighbors, coming home with grass on his shoes, grease on his hands, and a few dollars folded carefully in his pocket. The table laughed, not at Ryan, but with the affection people reserve for stories that make successful adults seem human again. Lauren laughed hardest. Her father smiled and asked Diane another question about Ryan's childhood, but Ryan barely touched his drink. To everyone else, the story sounded warm. To him, it sounded like a door opening onto a life he had spent years trying to close. After dinner, he asked Diane to step away from the room with him. She followed, still carrying the box, perhaps believing her son wanted a private moment with his mother before the biggest day of his life. Instead, Ryan began explaining that tomorrow would be formal, important, and filled with people whose opinions mattered to his future. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because what happened after Ryan led his mother away from that dining room would turn one empty chair at a wedding into a memory he could never look at the same way again. Ryan told Diane that Lauren's family lived differently from the people she was used to. He said she sometimes spoke too loudly, sometimes told stories that should remain private, and sometimes seemed unaware of how certain things sounded around people he hoped to impress. Diane listened without interrupting. Ryan kept talking, perhaps because stopping would have forced him to hear himself. Finally, he reached the sentence he had apparently rehearsed before she arrived. He told his mother that he thought it would be better if she did not attend his wedding the next day. Diane did not shout. She did not accuse Lauren. She did not remind Ryan of every sacrifice she had made while raising him. She did not mention the years she had gone without things she needed so that he could have things she believed might give him a better future. Instead, she looked directly at the man her little boy had become and asked whether he was ashamed that she was his mother. Ryan stared toward the closed doors behind them. He could have ended the conversation there. He could have apologized. He could have admitted that he was frightened of being judged and had allowed that fear to become cruelty. But he did none of those things. He only told her he was asking her to do this one thing for him. Diane lowered her eyes toward the leather box in her hands, and for several seconds, she seemed to be deciding whether there was still something she needed to say. Inside that box was the watch Tom Mercer had worn for years, the same watch Diane had kept wrapped safely away after his death. She had brought it because she wanted Ryan to have something of his father with him when he stood at the altar. But underneath that watch was the real reason Diane had been determined to speak privately with her son before the ceremony. A sealed hospital envelope rested beneath the velvet lining. Ryan never saw it. Diane opened the box only slightly, looked down at the papers, and then closed it again. Whatever she had come intending to say disappeared behind a calm expression. She placed the envelope back into her purse and told Ryan quietly that he would not have to worry about her tomorrow. There was no accusation in her voice. No dramatic goodbye. That almost made it worse. Ryan had expected an argument. Instead, his mother simply accepted the humiliation he had handed her and turned toward the exit. Ryan followed her toward the entrance, but stopped before reaching the valet lane. Diane continued alone. She passed Mercedes sedans, Range Rovers, polished SUVs, and expensive cars waiting beneath the country club lights until she reached the aging Buick she had driven for years. Ryan remained several yards behind her. For one brief second, as Diane opened the trunk, he noticed something he had not expected to see. There was a suitcase inside. He could have walked across the pavement. He could have asked where she was going. He could have told her he had made a terrible mistake before the distance between them became harder to cross. Instead, he convinced himself that his mother was upset and simply needed space. Diane placed the leather box beside the suitcase, closed the trunk, climbed behind the wheel, and drove away. Ryan stood beneath the country club lights watching until the Buick disappeared beyond the gates, then turned around and went back inside. Ryan believed Diane was driving home. She wasn't, and that small misunderstanding would become the first of several things he would desperately wish he had noticed sooner. Diane drove beyond the familiar roads that would have taken her back to her house. She kept going into the darkness with her suitcase behind her and the sealed hospital envelope inside her purse. The next morning, Ryan would stand in an expensive suit surrounded by hundreds of flowers, smiling guests, cameras, champagne, and everything he had convinced himself he needed for the perfect wedding. There would be no embarrassing childhood stories, no aging Buick outside, no mother in a simple blue dress reminding anyone where he came from. He would get exactly what he had asked for, but one chair in the front row would remain empty. And before that wedding day was over, Ryan Mercer would begin to understand that the person missing from that chair had been carrying a truth far more important than anything he had been trying so desperately to hide. The hardest part of understanding what Ryan had just done was realizing that he had not always been ashamed of Diane. There had been a time when she was the first person he looked for in a crowded room, the first person he called when something went wrong, and the person whose approval mattered more to him than anyone else's. Long before expensive country clubs, tailored suits, real estate deals, and Lauren Whitfield entered his life, Ryan Mercer was simply a boy growing up outside Dayton, Ohio, in a modest two-bedroom house where money was counted carefully and nothing useful was thrown away. His father, Tom Mercer, repaired industrial equipment for a living, often coming home with grease embedded beneath his fingernails. Diane worked in a school cafeteria, serving hundreds of children during the day before returning home to cook for her own family. They were not destitute. They had food, a home, and an old car that usually started. But one serious setback could change everything. For most of Ryan's childhood, that small house felt safe because Tom and Diane made it feel that way. Tom was the practical one, the kind of father who believed a boy should know how to repair something before he learned how to replace it. On summer mornings, Ryan followed him into the garage while Tom worked on neighbors' lawnmowers, small engines, and whatever else people brought to the house. Ryan learned to hand him the correct wrench, clean spark plugs, and keep his fingers away from hot metal. Sometimes a neighbor would pay Tom $20 or $30 for a repair, and Tom would quietly fold a few dollars into Ryan's hand. Diane would watch from the kitchen window as father and son worked together. Years later, that ordinary memory would become the story Diane told at the rehearsal dinner, the story Ryan believed exposed a past he wanted hidden. But when Ryan was 12 years old, there had been nothing embarrassing about it. He had been proud of his father. Then, when Ryan was 15, Tom died unexpectedly, and the Mercer household changed almost overnight. There was no dramatic warning that allowed the family to prepare itself emotionally or financially. One day, Tom was part of the structure holding their life together, and then he was gone. The funeral ended. Relatives returned home. Sympathy cards stopped arriving. But the mortgage payment came exactly when it always had. So did the electric bill. So did the insurance premium, groceries, school expenses, and every other obligation that grief does not postpone. Diane was suddenly a widow raising a teenage son on a cafeteria worker's income. Ryan was old enough to understand that money had become tight, but young enough not to understand just how tight. Diane wanted to keep it that way. She refused to allow the death of his father to become the reason Ryan abandoned every opportunity Tom had wanted for him. And so, after spending her days serving meals at the school, Diane began doing bookkeeping work at night. Ryan remembered seeing papers spread across the kitchen table after midnight, but he did not understand what they represented. He would wait for a glass of water and find Diane sitting beneath the yellow kitchen light with a calculator, reading glasses, invoices, and a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours earlier. She would smile and tell him to go back to bed. What Ryan did not see were the decisions that happened after he was asleep. Diane wore the same winter coat year after year because replacing it could wait. When the Buick needed maintenance, she could no longer afford easily. She learned how to change the oil herself. She clipped coupons, avoided restaurants, repaired things before replacing them, and quietly became skilled at making $1 perform the work of two. None of this was presented to Ryan as sacrifice. Diane understood something about children that Ryan would only recognize decades later. The strongest sacrifices are often the ones a parent never allows a child to feel obligated to repay. When Ryan made the varsity baseball team, the expenses arrived almost immediately. He needed better cleats, equipment, team fees, and money for travel. Ryan knew enough about their finances to tell Diane he could quit. Diane refused to discuss it. She told him they would find a way, and within days, the money appeared. Ryan believed she had taken extra bookkeeping work. Years later, he learned what had actually happened. Tom had owned an old fishing boat, nothing impressive, but something he had loved. After his death, it remained covered beside the garage because Diane could never quite bring herself to sell it. Until Ryan needed the baseball equipment. She sold the boat quietly and used the money for her son. Ryan played that season without knowing what had disappeared from behind the house to make it possible. Diane attended as many games as work allowed, sometimes arriving late in her cafeteria uniform, sitting near the back of the bleachers and cheering for a boy who never once seemed embarrassed to see her there. That boy loved his mother fiercely. He defended her when classmates made jokes about cafeteria food. He carried groceries from the Buick without being asked. When Diane fell asleep over bookkeeping papers at the kitchen table, Ryan sometimes covered her shoulders with a blanket before going upstairs. He understood that they did not have much, but poverty was never the story he told himself about his childhood. His story was that his mother had refused to let their family collapse after his father died. When his college acceptance letter arrived, Ryan read the tuition figure and immediately began lowering his expectations. Diane would not allow it. She told him the money was handled. Ryan believed financial aid and savings had covered most of it. In reality, Diane had been adding clients to her bookkeeping work for nearly 2 years. Some nights, she slept 4 or 5 hours before returning to the school cafeteria. She never told Ryan because she did not want gratitude to become another debt he felt he owed. College opened a world Ryan had never seen before. For the first time, he regularly met classmates whose parents owned companies, second homes, investment properties, and boats far larger than the one his mother had sold. Some students discussed internships arranged through family connections as casually as Ryan once discussed mowing lawns. He noticed differences he had barely considered growing up. Their fathers knew executives. Their mothers belonged to committees and foundations. They traveled internationally. They understood wine lists Ryan could barely pronounce. At first, Ryan responded by working harder. He became disciplined, ambitious, observant, and unusually good at reading rooms. When he graduated, Diane stood in the audience wearing the same good dress she had worn to several school events. Ryan found her afterward, wrapped his arms around her, and made a promise he fully believed at the time. One day, he told her she would never have to worry about money again. Diane laughed and told him seeing him graduate was already more than enough. Ryan entered commercial real estate and discovered that ambition could change a life quickly when combined with opportunity. He learned how investors thought, how developers negotiated, how deals were structured, and how confidence could sometimes matter almost as much as knowledge. His first inexpensive business suit became a better one. The old car became a newer sedan, then something more impressive. His apartment changed. His friends changed. Even his voice began changing in subtle ways. The Ohio expressions he had grown up using disappeared from business conversations. He became careful with pronunciation and learned which restaurants impressed clients. None of this made Ryan a bad person. For years, Diane was proud of every advancement. She kept newspaper clippings when his company was mentioned. She showed neighbors photographs of his new office. But somewhere between trying to enter a wealthier world and finally being invited into it, Ryan stopped viewing his childhood merely as something he had overcome. He began treating parts of it as something that needed to be concealed. The changes were small enough at first that Diane could pretend she had imagined them. At a business dinner, someone once asked Ryan what his late father had done for work. Tom had repaired factory machinery and industrial equipment, physical work that had paid the mortgage and helped raise his son. Ryan answered that his father had worked in engineering. The description was polished enough to prevent further questions while remaining close enough to the truth for Ryan to justify it to himself. Diane heard him and said nothing. On another occasion, someone asked about his mother's career. Ryan described Diane as a retired administrator. Diane had spent most of her working life inside a public school cafeteria, preparing meals, cleaning counters, organizing supplies, and making sure children were fed. She also kept books for small businesses at night, but she had never held the executive position Ryan's description seemed designed to suggest. Diane noticed that too. Again, she did not correct him. She simply smiled and allowed her son to tell whatever version of their lives made him comfortable. Then Ryan met Lauren Whitfield, and the distance between the person he had been and the person he wanted to become widened further. Lauren came from a family whose wealth had existed long enough that nobody seemed compelled to display it. Her childhood had included private schools, summer homes, country clubs, charity events, and family connections extending into business circles Ryan had spent years trying to reach. Lauren herself never asked Ryan to change. That distinction mattered. She liked his discipline, his intelligence, and the fact that he had built his career without the advantages she had grown up around. When Ryan occasionally spoke honestly about his father, Lauren listened with genuine interest. When she met Diane, she treated her warmly. The pressure Ryan felt did not come from anything Lauren demanded. Much of it came from Ryan himself. Standing beside people born into privilege made him suddenly conscious of every trace of the working-class life that had once made him proud. He began confusing acceptance with reinvention. By the time Ryan and Lauren became engaged, Diane had learned to recognize the moments when her son was editing his past. He did it gently, almost professionally. A small house became a comfortable suburban upbringing. His father's repair work became engineering. Diane's cafeteria job became administration. Summers fixing lawnmowers disappeared entirely. Ryan rarely lied outright. He simply removed whatever details made him feel exposed. Diane never challenged him in public. Perhaps she believed success had made him insecure in ways neither of them fully understood. Perhaps she told herself he would eventually become comfortable enough with who he was to stop disguising where he came from. And perhaps that was why the rehearsal dinner hurt more than Ryan could have understood. When Diane told that innocent story about Tom and the lawnmowers, she was remembering one of the happiest images of her husband and son together. Ryan heard the same story and thought only about what Lauren's wealthy relatives might think of him. By then, however, Diane was carrying a secret much larger than Ryan's embarrassment. About 3 months before the wedding, Diane began noticing that ordinary days seemed to require more energy than they once had. At first, she blamed age. She was 62, still independent, still accustomed to doing almost everything for herself, and not someone who rushed to a doctor each time something hurt. She became tired more quickly. Then came an ache in her abdomen that seemed minor enough to ignore until it kept returning. Carol Hayes, Diane's closest friend, noticed that Diane was canceling plans and leaving errands unfinished. When Diane dismissed the fatigue as getting older, Carol refused to accept the explanation. Eventually, she persuaded Diane to make an appointment. That appointment led to tests. The first test led to another. Questions became scans. Scans became appointments with specialists. Somewhere along the way, reassurance disappeared from the conversations around her. And finally, there was a biopsy, followed by the kind of waiting in which every ringing telephone can divide a person's life into before and after. Diane went to the appointment alone when the results were explained. The doctor told her that the tests indicated pancreatic cancer. Everything after those words seemed to move more slowly. Diane heard portions of the explanation about the tumor, treatment, surgery, and the importance of moving quickly, but part of her remained fixed on one thought: Ryan was getting married. Her only son, the boy she and Tom had raised inside that 2-bedroom house, was weeks away from beginning his own family. Diane eventually told Carol about the diagnosis, but she did not tell Ryan. Carol could not understand why. Whatever disagreements mother and son had developed, this was different. Ryan needed to know. Diane agreed that he did. She simply did not want the news delivered over the telephone or dropped into the middle of the final weeks before his wedding. For almost a year, Ryan and Lauren had planned that weekend. Diane refused to let her diagnosis become the event everyone remembered instead. Her doctors wanted treatment to move quickly, and a surgical procedure was scheduled for the morning after the wedding. The timing left Diane with a decision she could no longer postpone. She would attend the rehearsal dinner, wait until the celebration was ending, then ask Ryan for a few private minutes. She would give him Tom's watch first. She imagined telling him that his father would have wanted him to wear it, or at least keep it close on his wedding day. Then she would show him the hospital paperwork and explain what doctors had found. She would tell him not to cancel the wedding, not to change the honeymoon plans because of her, and not to turn the ceremony into a vigil around his mother. She simply wanted him to know before she entered the hospital. That was the purpose of the sealed envelope underneath Tom's watch. It was why Diane had been carrying the old leather box when Ryan pulled her away from the rehearsal dinner and told her that her presence at his wedding would embarrass him. Now, hours after that conversation, Diane drove alone through the Ohio night. The country club lights had disappeared behind her. Her blue dress was covered by a cardigan she had kept in the Buick, and her suitcase rested in the trunk beside Tom's leather jewelry box. She was not driving toward the small house Ryan assumed she would return to. She was heading toward Columbus, where she planned to stay near the hospital before reporting for surgery the following morning. Somewhere along the highway, her phone rang. Carol's name appeared on the screen. Carol knew the rehearsal dinner should have ended by then and wanted to hear how Ryan had taken the news. Diane answered, and Carol quickly sensed something had happened. Diane did not repeat Ryan's words. She did not say that her own son had asked her to disappear from one of the most important days of his life. She only told Carol that she had decided not to tell him yet. Carol pressed her. Surgery was hours away. Ryan deserved to know where his mother would be while he stood at the altar. Diane remained calm. She said Ryan had enough on his mind. That was all. Even after being told she was an embarrassment, Diane was still protecting the same boy she had protected after Tom died. She was protecting his wedding from her illness. She was protecting his happiness from her fear. And, perhaps without realizing it, she was also protecting Ryan from understanding the full cruelty of what he had just done. If he had known about the hospital envelope when he watched her Buick disappear from the country club parking lot, he might have chased after her. If he had known about the biopsy, the diagnosis, the surgery, and the suitcase, there might never have been an empty chair the following morning. But he knew none of those things. Diane drove toward Columbus. Ryan returned to his rehearsal dinner, and the distance between them grew mile by mile. The next morning, Ryan woke in a hotel suite surrounded by pressed shirts, polished shoes, unopened champagne, and friends preparing for the wedding. Sunlight came through the windows on what appeared to be exactly the kind of day he and Lauren had spent months planning. For a few moments, Ryan thought about calling Diane. He picked up his phone, looked at her name, and put it down again. He told himself she needed time. He told himself they would repair the disagreement after the wedding. He told himself that his mother knew he loved her even if the conversation the night before had gone badly. Then Ryan arrived at the ceremony venue and saw the front row. One chair had been reserved for Diane Mercer. It was empty, and as Ryan looked at that empty chair, something happened that he would later remember with unbearable clarity. He did not panic. He did not immediately wonder where his mother had gone. For one brief, shameful moment, Ryan felt relieved. The wedding could proceed exactly as he wanted, and before that day, he would learn what that meant. The empty chair was exactly what Ryan Mercer had wanted. That was the part he would struggle to forgive himself for later. On the morning of his wedding, with hundreds of flowers arranged around the ceremony room and guests beginning to arrive, Ryan looked toward the front row and saw the place reserved for his mother. Diane was nowhere to be found. For one brief moment, relief passed through him. There would be no childhood stories. No old Buick outside the country club. No mother in a modest dress reminding the people around him that Ryan Mercer had not been born into their world. Everything could finally be perfect. What Ryan did not know was that while he adjusted a $1,000 suit and prepared to marry the woman he loved, Diane was miles away with a hospital bracelet waiting for her, a cancer diagnosis he knew nothing about, and a surgery scheduled for the following morning. By nightfall, that empty chair would mean something completely different. Ryan had slept badly, although he refused to admit why. His groomsmen blamed nerves and teased him about finally becoming a married man. Someone opened champagne before noon. Another friend spent several minutes trying to straighten Ryan's tie, while everyone laughed about how nervous he looked. Ryan smiled when expected, but his attention repeatedly drifted toward his phone. Diane had not called. She had not sent one of the long morning messages she usually sent on important days. There was no reminder to eat breakfast, no sentimental comment about Tom, no photograph from Ryan's childhood. Nothing. Ryan told himself this was good. His mother had understood what he wanted. She was giving him space. Yet every time he looked at the blank screen, he felt a discomfort he could not explain away. He had expected Diane to be hurt. He had expected anger, perhaps even an argument. What unsettled him was how quietly she had disappeared after telling him that he would not have to worry about her. Upstairs, Lauren Whitfield was preparing for the ceremony surrounded by her mother, bridesmaids, and relatives who had traveled from several states. She knew none of what had happened after the rehearsal dinner. As far as Lauren understood, Diane would be downstairs before the ceremony began. Lauren had even asked her mother to make certain Diane felt included during the reception. Whatever differences existed between the Mercer and Whitfield families had never troubled Lauren as much as Ryan imagined. Lauren had spent enough time around privilege to know that money could make people comfortable without making them kind, interesting, or admirable. Diane, in contrast, had always struck her as genuine. Lauren remembered the way Diane spoke about Tom, the pride in her voice when she discussed Ryan's childhood, and the almost embarrassed smile she gave whenever anyone complimented her son. Lauren had no idea that the same childhood stories she found endearing were precisely what Ryan had asked Diane to stop bringing into his new life. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because as guests began filling the ceremony room, Ryan was about to discover that the embarrassment he had been trying to escape existed almost entirely inside his own mind. One of Lauren's uncles approached him and asked where his mother was. The question caught Ryan unprepared. For half a second, he considered telling the truth. Instead, he said Diane had not been feeling well. The lie came easily enough that it frightened him afterward. Lauren happened to be close enough to hear it. She turned toward him with confusion. Diane had seemed perfectly healthy at the rehearsal dinner. Lauren started to ask what Ryan meant, but someone announced that the ceremony was about to begin. Ryan told her they would talk later. Within minutes, music began, conversation stopped, and everyone turned toward the aisle. Ryan stood at the front of the room and watched Lauren approach him. For months, he had imagined this exact moment. Her father walked beside her. Friends and relatives filled the seats. Everything appeared almost impossibly polished. The flowers were perfect. The lighting was perfect. Lauren looked exactly as Ryan had imagined she would. The ceremony moved forward without interruption, and yet Ryan's eyes kept returning to one place. The empty chair in the front row seemed strangely obvious now. He noticed it while Lauren's father took his seat. He noticed it during the vows. He noticed it when Lauren squeezed his hand. Ryan had wanted Diane absent because he believed her presence might remind everyone of a life he had worked so hard to leave behind. Instead, her absence became the most noticeable thing in the room to him. Each time he looked at that chair, he remembered his mother standing beside the country club doors the previous evening. holding Tom's leather jewelry box while asking whether her own son was ashamed of her. But Ryan pushed the memory aside. There would be time to repair things later. That was the comforting lie people often tell themselves after saying something they cannot immediately take back. Tomorrow, he could call Diane. After the honeymoon, they could have lunch. He could apologize properly, perhaps buy her something expensive, perhaps explain that the pressure of the wedding had affected him more than he realized. Ryan still believed this was an argument that could be postponed, so he smiled for photographs. He hugged Lauren's relatives. He shook hands with business contacts and accepted congratulations. By the time everyone moved into the reception, the room was filled with conversation and champagne glasses. Ryan had achieved exactly what he believed he wanted. Nobody was asking about lawnmowers. Nobody was talking about cafeteria work. Nobody mentioned the small two-bedroom house outside Dayton. But then Lauren took him quietly aside and asked the question he had been avoiding since morning. She wanted to know what had really happened to his mother. Ryan began with the easiest version. He told Lauren that he and Diane had disagreed after dinner. Lauren waited. Ryan said Diane had become upset and decided not to come. Lauren continued looking at him, and he realized immediately that she did not believe this was the whole story. She asked what they had argued about. Ryan said it was complicated. Lauren asked again. Finally, piece by piece, Ryan admitted what he had said. He explained that he had worried Diane might tell inappropriate stories, that she sometimes spoke too freely about his childhood, and that he wanted the wedding to feel polished and professional because several important people were attending. Lauren listened without interrupting. Then Ryan reached the part he could no longer soften. He admitted that he had told Diane it might be better if she stayed away. Lauren's expression changed. She did not raise her voice. She did not create a scene. She simply asked whether Ryan had really told his mother not to attend his wedding because he was embarrassed by her. There are moments when anger gives a person something to fight against. Lauren's disappointment gave Ryan nothing. She looked at him as though she were seeing a part of him she had never known existed. Ryan tried to explain the pressure he felt around her family. He spoke about the country club, her father's business associates, the people whose approval could help his career, and how different his upbringing had been from hers. Lauren stopped him. Her family, she said, had never asked Ryan to pretend he had grown up wealthy. Her parents knew where he came from. They respected what he had built. Then Lauren told him something Ryan had not expected. Her father had spoken with Diane for nearly 20 minutes after dinner and had told Lauren afterward how much he admired her. He had been particularly impressed that Diane had raised Ryan while working multiple jobs after losing her husband. The very story Ryan wanted hidden had made Lauren's father respect him more, not less. Then came the detail that made Ryan look toward the reception tables. Lauren's mother had personally rearranged part of the seating chart so Diane would sit beside her during dinner. She had done it because she did not want the groom's widowed mother to feel isolated among people she barely knew. Ryan stared at Lauren, struggling to absorb what she was saying. No one in the Whitfield family had asked him to hide his mother. No one had complained about her blue dress. No one had mocked the lawnmower story. No one seemed bothered that Diane had spent years working in a school cafeteria. Ryan had spent months anticipating judgment that had never arrived. He had humiliated his mother to protect himself from people who were not attacking him. And for the first time, he began to understand that the distance separating him from Diane had not been created by Lauren's family, wealth, business, or social expectations. Ryan had created it himself. He pulled out his phone and called Diane. The call rang until voicemail answered. Ryan ended it and immediately tried again. Nothing. He sent a message telling her he needed to talk and that he was sorry about the night before. The message showed no sign that she had read it. He called the house. No answer. He called again. Lauren remained beside him as Ryan's embarrassment slowly turned into unease. He remembered the suitcase in Diane's trunk. At the time, he had barely noticed it. Now the image returned with uncomfortable clarity. Why had she packed a suitcase before coming to the rehearsal dinner? Where had she been going? Ryan called Diane once more, then began searching for Carol Hayes in his contacts. Carol had known their family for years. If Diane had gone somewhere, Carol would probably know. But before Ryan placed the call, his phone rang. Diane's name appeared on the screen. Ryan answered immediately. It was not Diane. Carol was speaking from Diane's phone. Her voice was restrained, and Ryan could tell almost instantly that something was wrong. He asked where his mother was. Carol did not answer directly. Instead, she asked why Ryan wanted to know now. The question irritated him because he was already carrying more guilt than he knew how to manage. He told Carol that Diane had disappeared, that she was not answering calls, and that she had missed the wedding. There was a pause. Carol said Diane had not missed anything by accident. Ryan became defensive and said this was between him and his mother. Carol agreed. Then she asked him one question that seemed completely unrelated to everything they had been discussing. She wanted to know whether Diane had told him about the biopsy results she received on Monday. Ryan stopped speaking. He looked at Lauren. Then he asked Carol what biopsy she was talking about. Carol went quiet. Until that moment, she had assumed Diane had eventually told him. Ryan repeated the question. What biopsy? The wedding reception continued around him, but Ryan seemed suddenly removed from it. People were laughing several yards away. Glasses touched. Music played. Guests crossed the room carrying drinks. Yet Ryan heard only Carol's breathing through the phone. Finally, she told him Diane had been undergoing tests for several weeks after experiencing persistent exhaustion and abdominal discomfort. Doctors had found something concerning. Further testing followed. Then came the biopsy. The results confirmed pancreatic cancer. Ryan said nothing. Lauren watched the color disappear from his face. Ryan asked Carol to repeat herself even though he had heard every word. Cancer. Diane had cancer. The mother he had told not to attend his wedding had spent the previous evening carrying a diagnosis her only son knew nothing about. Ryan's first question was whether Diane was all right. Carol told him doctors believed there was a treatment plan worth pursuing, but they did not want to delay. Diane was scheduled for surgery the following morning in Columbus. The words struck Ryan one after another. Columbus. The suitcase. The envelope. The leather box. Suddenly, every detail he had ignored rearranged itself into something obvious. Diane had not packed because she was angry. She had not driven away because she wanted to punish him. She had been preparing to enter a hospital. Ryan looked across the reception hall and once again saw the empty chair associated with his mother. Hours earlier, that chair had represented relief. Now it looked like evidence of everything he had failed to understand. While he had been exchanging vows, taking photographs, and protecting himself from imaginary embarrassment, Diane had been preparing herself for the possibility that she might face surgery without her son beside her. Ryan asked why she had not told him. Carol's answer was almost worse than the diagnosis. Diane had wanted to tell him. She had planned the conversation carefully. She knew surgery had to happen quickly, but she refused to announce her cancer before the wedding because she did not want the celebration transformed into a weekend of fear. She wanted Ryan and Lauren to have their ceremony. She wanted photographs in which nobody was forcing a smile because they were thinking about a hospital waiting room. She wanted Lauren's family to celebrate their daughter without worrying about the groom's mother. So Diane had decided to wait until after the rehearsal dinner, tell Ryan privately, and make him promise not to cancel anything. She had carried the hospital paperwork with her that evening. Carol said Diane had placed it inside an old leather jewelry box along with something belonging to Tom. Ryan closed his eyes. He could see the box in Diane's hands. He remembered watching her open it slightly after he told her not to attend the wedding. At the time he had assumed she was looking at Tom's watch. Now he understood there had been something else inside. He remembered her lowering her eyes. He remembered the silence that followed. He remembered the moment she almost seemed ready to tell him something. And then he remembered the question that would stay with him long after the wedding photographs were stored away. Are you ashamed that I'm your mother? Ryan had been given one final opportunity to stop. Diane had stood in front of him carrying evidence of a disease that frightened her, waiting to tell her only child that she needed surgery. And instead of asking what was wrong, Ryan had explained why her presence might make him look bad in front of wealthy strangers. Carol told him that after leaving the country club, Diane had called her from the road. Carol had asked whether Ryan knew. Diane said no. When Carol urged her to turn around, Diane refused. She said Ryan had enough on his mind. Those words hit Ryan harder than any accusation could have. Even after he rejected her, Diane had protected him. Even after he made her feel unwelcome at her son's wedding, she worried that her illness might spoil his happiness. Ryan asked where she was staying. Carol hesitated. Diane had made it clear that she did not want anyone disrupting the wedding or contacting Ryan unless there was a serious complication. She believed her son was beginning his marriage that day and that his attention belonged with Lauren. Ryan looked toward his new wife. Lauren did not need an explanation. She could see the decision forming before he spoke. Ryan removed the champagne glass from his hand and placed it on the nearest table. There would be no waiting until tomorrow. There would be no apology after the honeymoon. There would be no expensive gift capable of making what he had said disappear. Ryan told Lauren he had to go. She agreed before he finished the sentence. She would handle the guests. Ryan started toward the exit, still dressed in the suit he had worn while promising Lauren a lifetime together. Several people tried to stop him with congratulations, questions, photographs, and handshakes. Ryan barely responded. Minutes later, the country club doors closed behind him, the same doors Diane had walked through alone the previous night. This time Ryan crossed the valet lane without noticing a single expensive car. The symbols that had mattered so much 24 hours earlier suddenly seemed absurdly small. He climbed into his vehicle, called Carol again, and asked for the hospital address. Carol gave it to him. Columbus was hours away, and Diane's surgery was scheduled early the next morning. Ryan drove into the night with the reception disappearing behind him, and for the first time since becoming successful, there was nothing his money could immediately fix. He could not purchase another version of the rehearsal dinner. He could not return to the moment before Diane asked whether he was ashamed of her. He could not force his mother to answer the phone. All he could do was drive. During the journey, Carol told him one final thing. Diane had no idea Ryan was coming. She had left instructions that he should not be disturbed during his wedding unless something went wrong. In Diane's mind, her son was still exactly where he had wanted to be, surrounded by the people he had chosen, celebrating a perfect wedding without the mother he believed might embarrass him. Ryan tightened his hands around the steering wheel and continued toward Columbus. He had spent years trying to outrun where he came from. Now he was racing through the darkness, terrified he might reach the woman who gave him that beginning too late. By the time Ryan Mercer reached the hospital, his mother was already gone behind a set of doors he could not follow her through. Less than 24 hours earlier, he had looked Diane in the eyes and told her that her presence at his wedding would embarrass him. Now he would have given almost anything just to see her open those eyes again. Ryan arrived in Columbus early that morning, still wearing his wedding trousers and dress shirt beneath a dark overcoat. He had driven through most of the night with the same memory returning every few miles. Diane standing outside the country club with Tom's old leather jewelry box in her hands. He had thought she was carrying an unwanted reminder of his past. He knew now that she had also been carrying a cancer diagnosis. Ryan approached the hospital desk, gave Diane's name, and asked where she was. The answer stopped him cold. His mother had already been taken into surgery. There was nothing Ryan could do except wait. That was perhaps the first truly powerless moment of his adult life. Commercial real estate had trained him to solve problems through negotiation, persistence, money, connections, or leverage. If a deal stalled, there was another offer. If financing collapsed, there was another lender. If a client became unhappy, there was usually some combination of time and money capable of repairing the damage. But none of those tools mattered inside that hospital. Ryan could not negotiate his way back to the previous evening. He could not purchase another conversation with Diane before she entered surgery. He could not erase the sentence telling her she was too embarrassing to attend her only son's wedding. Most painfully, he could not even apologize. Diane was unconscious somewhere beyond the waiting room while surgeons worked, and Ryan was left with the one thing success had never taught him to handle well: consequences that could not be controlled. Carol Hayes arrived carrying the leather jewelry box Diane had brought to the rehearsal dinner. She did not lecture Ryan. She did not need to. Ryan looked exhausted enough already. Carol simply placed the box beside him and explained that Diane had left it with her before checking into the hospital. Ryan recognized the scratches along its edges immediately. It had belonged to Tom for years, and after Tom died, Diane had stored several of his most personal belongings inside it. Ryan opened the lid carefully. There was his father's watch, its worn metal band folded beneath the face. Ryan remembered that watch from childhood. He remembered seeing it on Tom's wrist while they repaired lawnmowers together in the garage. He remembered staring at it while waiting for his father to finish work so they could go fishing. Beneath the watch was the hospital paperwork Diane had never shown him. And beneath that was a small envelope with Ryan's name written across the front in his mother's handwriting. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because the message Ryan found inside that envelope was not an angry goodbye. That would almost have been easier. Diane had written the note before the rehearsal dinner, before Ryan humiliated her, and before she knew that she would spend the night before surgery driving toward Columbus alone. The message was simple. She explained that the watch had belonged to Tom, and that Tom had been wearing it on the day Ryan was born. Diane thought it should belong to their son now, especially on the day he began his own family. There was no dramatic speech about sacrifice, no reminder of everything she had done after Tom died. Just a few ordinary sentences from a mother preparing to give her son something that connected 3 generations of the Mercer family. Then Ryan reached the final line. "Your father was proud of the man you were becoming. I am too." Ryan read that sentence again, then again. Diane had written that she was proud of him before walking into a rehearsal dinner where her son would tell her that the life she and Tom had given him embarrassed him. She had written it before Ryan described her childhood stories as something that might damage the image he had built. Before he suggested that Lauren's family belonged to a world Diane could not understand. Before he asked his own mother to remove herself from one of the most important days of his life. The note did not accuse him because Diane had never imagined she would need to defend herself. Ryan sat holding Tom's watch while the hospital continued moving around him. Nurses crossed the hallway. Phones rang at the desk. Families entered and left waiting rooms. Yet his attention remained fixed on one sentence. His father had been proud of the man he was becoming. His mother had been proud too. Ryan could no longer avoid the question that frightened him most. Would either of them have been proud of the man he had actually become? Carol knew what Ryan was thinking, but there was something else she believed he needed to understand. Diane had known for years that Ryan was becoming uncomfortable with his background. She knew he told business associates that Tom had worked in engineering rather than explaining that he repaired industrial machinery. She had heard Ryan describe her as a retired administrator instead of saying that she had spent most of her working life in a school cafeteria. Diane knew that invitations to Ryan's professional gatherings became less frequent as his career advanced. She noticed that he introduced Lauren to wealthy clients easily, but seemed uncomfortable when old family friends appeared around the same people. Diane was not naive. She had watched her son slowly polish his history until almost nothing remained of the small house, the cafeteria uniform, the repaired lawnmowers, the old fishing boat, or the woman who had spent nights doing bookkeeping so he could attend college. She knew. She simply never exposed him. That realization was worse than discovering that Diane had been unaware. Ryan had spent years believing he was cleverly separating two worlds, yet his mother had seen everything and quietly protected him from the embarrassment of being confronted. She never corrected him when he upgraded Tom's occupation in conversation. She never told his colleagues about nights spent counting bills at the kitchen table. She never announced that his baseball equipment had been purchased with money from selling his father's fishing boat. She never explained exactly how many additional hours she had worked to help him through college. Diane could have reminded Ryan publicly that the successful man standing in those expensive rooms had once depended completely on a cafeteria worker's paycheck. She never did. Not because she was ashamed of the truth, and not because she agreed with the version of their history Ryan had created. She kept quiet because humiliating her son would never have made her feel powerful. She loved him more than she needed credit. Sitting in that hospital, Ryan finally understood that Diane had never been the person he was ashamed of. She was simply the person onto whom he had transferred a fear he had never admitted. Somewhere inside the successful executive was still the 15-year-old boy who had watched his father die and understood how quickly security could disappear. Ryan had entered rooms filled with people whose wealth seemed permanent, whose families had connections he never possessed, and whose childhoods appeared untouched by the anxiety he remembered. He had convinced himself that belonging among them required removing every sign that he had once been different. But success had never actually erased that frightened teenager. The better the suit, the larger the deal, and the more powerful the room, the more Ryan worried someone might discover that he had grown up counting dollars carefully in a two-bedroom house outside Dayton. And instead of confronting that insecurity, he had eventually made the woman who saved him from it pay the price. Hours passed before the surgeon finally appeared. Ryan stood so quickly that Tom's watch nearly slipped from his hand. The procedure had been completed successfully. There would still be a difficult recovery, additional treatment decisions, and no guarantees that Ryan was entitled to demand from anyone. But Diane had made it through the operation. Ryan felt relief so intense that for several seconds he could not speak. When he was eventually allowed into her room, the woman on the bed looked smaller than the mother in his memories. Diane was exhausted, surrounded by the quiet machinery of postoperative care, and not fully awake when Ryan first entered. He pulled a chair beside her bed and waited again. The difference was that this time he was exactly where he should have been. Eventually Diane opened her eyes. She saw Ryan sitting beside her, still wearing part of the suit from the wedding she had not attended, and confusion crossed her face before recognition settled in. Ryan tried to apologize immediately. He had rehearsed words throughout the drive and again in the waiting room, but standing beside Diane made every prepared explanation sound inadequate. There was no explanation for telling your mother that her existence embarrassed you. There were only reasons, and Ryan finally understood that reasons were not the same as excuses. He told her he had been wrong. He told her Lauren's family had never judged her. He admitted that the pressure he claimed to feel had largely come from himself. Then Ryan said the one sentence that seemed closest to the truth. "Mom, I was ashamed of the wrong person." Diane listened quietly. She did not reward his confession with immediate forgiveness. She did not tell him the wedding incident no longer mattered simply because something more frightening had happened afterward. Her response was tired, controlled, and painfully clear. "Words don't disappear because you're sorry you said them." Ryan nodded. For once, he did not try to negotiate what came next. Diane did, however, allow him to stay. So Ryan stayed. He postponed the honeymoon, although he never presented the decision as some heroic sacrifice. Lauren understood. She visited frequently, sometimes bringing Diane things from home, sometimes sitting beside her without talking much at all. Ryan spent more time in hospital corridors during those weeks than he had spent inside his childhood neighborhood in several years. Recovery was slow, and treatment did not transform Diane's life into a neat story where one operation solved everything. There were good days, frightening days, appointments, uncertainty, exhaustion, and moments when Ryan wanted reassurance nobody could give him. But the crisis forced something he had avoided for years. He could no longer keep his mother in one world and his successful life in another. His colleagues knew Diane was ill. Lauren's family checked on her. Ryan began speaking about his childhood without first calculating whether the details made him look impressive. Slowly, the story he had spent years editing returned. Several months later, Ryan attended a company dinner where a new associate asked how he had entered commercial real estate. It was exactly the sort of question that once would have triggered the polished version of his past. This time Ryan answered differently. He said his father had repaired industrial machinery and died when Ryan was 15. He said his mother worked in a public school cafeteria during the day and kept books for small businesses at night. He explained that they lived in a two-bedroom house outside Dayton, and that nearly everything he had accomplished began with two parents who taught him to work before he ever understood what success meant. Nobody laughed. Nobody looked uncomfortable. Nobody seemed to think less of him. The conversation simply continued. For Ryan, that ordinary reaction revealed how much pain he had created while trying to defend himself from judgment that often existed only in his imagination. He no longer needed Tom to have been an engineer. Repairing machinery had been enough. Diane did not need to have been an administrator. Feeding schoolchildren had been enough. Months after the wedding, when Diane was strong enough to spend an afternoon at Ryan and Lauren's home, Lauren brought out the wedding photographs. Diane turned through images of flowers, relatives, the ceremony, the cake, and Ryan standing beside his new wife. There were photographs of Lauren's parents, business colleagues, old friends, and people Diane barely recognized. Then she reached one photograph taken from the side of the ceremony room. Ryan immediately noticed it. In the foreground was the front row, and there, between beautifully dressed guests, was the empty chair that had been reserved for his mother. Ryan reached for the photograph and said they should get rid of it. Diane stopped him. She studied the empty chair for several seconds before handing the photograph back. She did not want it destroyed. Some memories, she explained, become important precisely because people wish they could erase them. Removing the photograph would not change what happened. Remembering it might change what happened next. That empty chair had meant 3 different things over the course of a single day. In the morning, it represented Ryan's relief that the part of his past he considered embarrassing would remain hidden. Hours later, after Carol's phone call, it represented the terrifying possibility that he had rejected his mother at the moment she needed him most. Months later, it became something else entirely. It became a warning. Ryan had spent years believing success meant increasing the distance between himself and the vulnerable boy he used to be. But the people who helped build his future were standing inside the very past he wanted erased. Tom's grease-covered hands, Diane's cafeteria uniform, the bookkeeping papers spread across a kitchen table after midnight, an old fishing boat sold quietly so a boy could play baseball. None of those details diminished Ryan's accomplishments. They explained them, and it had taken an empty chair at his wedding, a hospital envelope, and the possibility of losing his mother for him to finally understand that. Success can change a person's address. It can change the car in the driveway, the clothes in the closet, the names stored in a phone, and the rooms where that person is invited to sit. It can create opportunities that once seemed impossible. But there is a difference between moving beyond hardship and becoming ashamed of everyone who remembers you before the hardship ended. Ryan nearly learned that distinction too late. Diane survived the surgery, but survival did not erase his words. Forgiveness did not arrive because a dramatic apology demanded it. Trust had to be rebuilt through smaller choices made long after the hospital room emptied. Ryan could not change the wedding photograph. He could not put Diane back into that front row chair. What he could change was whether she would ever again have reason to wonder if her son considered her a part of his life worth hiding. And that leaves one question that may be harder to answer than Ryan ever imagined. If you were Diane, could you forgive your only son after he told you that you were too embarrassing to attend his wedding, especially knowing everything you had sacrificed to help him become the man standing at that altar? Or are there certain words that an apology can never completely remove? Tell me what you would have done in the comments, because people will see this situation very differently. Some will believe Diane was right to allow Ryan another chance. Others will believe he crossed a line a child should never cross with the parent who stood beside him when almost nobody else did. And if stories about family, choices, and consequences stay with you long after they're over, subscribe. There are more stories coming where one decision changes an entire family.